Welcome, everybody. Welcome, John. I hope you're feeling okay.
Oh, he's silent.
Thank you. Less than thrilled, but it is what it is. I'm getting there.
I hear you. All right, so the first item on our agenda tonight is to take action on the minutes of November 29th, 2023. So I appreciate the fact that you not only did the minutes, but we included all the written documents. I think that's helpful too, so thank you. I cut you off, John. What were you going to say?
To accept as presented.
All right, I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Second.
Any discussion? Post changes, look good? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Take John as an aye. All those opposed? All right, motion carried. So the next item on the agenda is a presentation from Preservation Connecticut regarding local historic districts. We have Stacy Vero on the line to give us a presentation. Of course, everybody knows Bill, who's sitting at the table. Bill's a good friend, a resident, property owner of the Granby Center area. Just by way of background, so Bill made a presentation to myself and Mark Lockwood, the chair of the Planning Commission, Bill and a few others, about some of the benefits of considering historic district. We didn't really get into any of the details, but I thought it would be a good idea to have the group make a presentation to us. Stacy, not necessarily because we're ready to move forward on the establishment of a district. We really haven't have any discussions about it. But really to give us a feel, because this issue of our historic buildings and the role that they will play in our town center in particular is one that we want to incorporate in this process.
Yeah, good.
So we thought for sure a presentation by you, especially to the extent that you can kind of focus on the value, what value added do we get from historic districts and any potential downsides as we work through our process. So does anybody have any preliminary questions or?
I'm sure one of those.
Of course, I only passed it halfway.
Thank you. No, we're good.
If not, I will
Yeah.
just let Stacy get started.
Okay, well, I want to introduce Stacy first.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. So my name is Bill Ross. I live at 239 Salmon Brook Street in Granby. And John Morgan and I he lives at 221. We met with Mark and Mark a couple months ago, I guess. And we talked about the historic district and all that. And so we've consulted with Mary Dunn from the State Historic Preservation Office and also with Stacy. And they gave us some ideas how to start this local historic district. It's funny, the district is a national historic on the National Historic Register. The other towns around here, Simsbury, Suffield, Windsor, Enfield, Canton, Farmington, New Hartford, and Colbert, all have local historic districts. So just as a background, I passed this map out. Did anybody take the stroll through Granby history a couple years ago during COVID? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So we had over 1,000 unique views on our website. So there's still a lot of interest in the history and the beautiful homes that are on our street. Every house had a large poster on it with a picture of what the house looked like in the 1800s and the QR code. Folks could zap the QR code with their phone, take them to the website, and they could read about the history of the street, the house, and the town. So it was really interesting. So we have one of the most historic districts, unique historic districts. So in 1985, it was placed on the National Register for Historic Places. It's very unique, and there's 10 different style homes on the street, which is somewhat unique. So with me tonight is Stacy Vero from Preservation Connecticut, and they give out grants. Matter of fact, they gave a grant to restore part of the Wilcox House. So we've applied some grants there through the Historic Society. So Stacy's going to take you through a slide presentation real quick and just kind of overview, just like Mark said, an overview of what the historic district is and the benefits to the town. So Stacy, all yours.
All right. So if you just bear with me a little bit tonight, usually Mary Dunn does this. Mary Dunn is with the State Historic Preservation Office. Mary is in charge of the establishment process for local historic districts. So what I will describe to you tonight is all based on her slides. She unfortunately couldn't be with us tonight, so I'm sort of pinch hitting for her. We are the statutory nonprofit partner with the State Historic Preservation Office, so we do a lot of advocacy and outreach work. So that's why I'm here tonight. I don't see the slides per se, but I will.
Hang on just a second, Stacy.
They all have a copy of the slides, Stacy.
Oh, no, we got it.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you've got the slides, so I can just sort of go through them on my own, and you can keep pace with me, I guess.
well, hang on just 1 second, Stacy. So can people on
I
Zoom,
believe she should be able to see it now.
Yeah.
you can
Perfect.
see them?
Perfect, thank you. Great.
So rather than
Yeah,
share our
great.
screen, rather than share the screen, Stacy, what, you just tell us when you want us to move to the next slide and we'll do it. That work?
Great.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
So, sure, you can go to the next slide. So what I'm going to do tonight is go through a little bit of background about what a local historic district is, how they're established, some of the benefits, some of the concerns people typically have, and then I can just answer any questions that you might have that come up. To begin with, there is a difference between, as Bill said, the National Register District, the State Register District, and local historic district. The National Register is an honorary designation. You already have that, so you know that there really are no restrictions related to that in your town. There are some protections related to that under the Connecticut Environmental Protection Act. And if you'd like to learn some more about that, I can talk about it, but really it's to protect buildings from unreasonable destruction. So it would be a complete demolition. And then certain properties are eligible for federal tax credits and grants that are listed on the National Register. Now, every property that's listed on the National Register is also listed on the State Register. So properties can be listed on just the State Register as well, but that is the threshold for tax credits in the state and for granting through both the State Historic Preservation Office and our organization. Again, it's honorary only. It provides recognition, and SEBA does not apply. There are no restrictions, and a property does not need to be 50 years of age typically to be listed on the State Register. A local historic district is really what we're going to be talking about tonight. That is maybe what most people associate with historic districts. It's a group of buildings or a property that is overseen by a commission. Certain changes are regulated by a local ordinance, and there is a listing here on Mary's slide that's a bit outdated. There isn't an automatic listing on the State Register of historic places anymore. As of 2017, that change was made. So again, these are properties that are significant locally, but they are not necessarily evaluated in the same way that the National or State Register properties are listed. The next slide. So the authority that allows these districts to be established, the local historic districts, was established under the Connecticut General Statute, Section 7-147, and all of the regulatory language that I'm going to use tonight really falls under 7-147. So the idea of establishing historic districts is, just as it says here, to promote preservation, to promote the cultural and economic and general just identity of a place through the protection of these buildings and their associated characteristics. So when you're talking about the 10 different types of 10 different styles of buildings found in the National Register District, you're really talking about a period of time and several periods of time that are being shown in that. And certainly the styles could be, very distinctive to Granby. There could be local builders that have specific sort of vernacular languages that are spoken there. And that's why local historic districts are important, and that's why maintaining them and maintaining the characteristics that make them so distinctive is crucial. Next slide. So the procedures to create a historic district, first there is the study report, and the study report is made up of a number of sections. The first is an architectural and historical essay. There is a map that shows the boundaries of the district. It does not need to be exactly the same boundaries that are found in your national registered district. It can vary based on a number of factors. It will include a list of properties and the owners of record, and it will include a proposed ordinance. Now, there's language in the enabling statute that would provide you with that ordinance. You can also modify it based on your local desires. And then there will be photos of all the properties. Next slide. And then the process really is pretty straightforward. You would submit that study report to Mary at the SHPO and to your local planning and zoning. Next slide. Then you would hold a public hearing, and you would ask that all of the property owners that have been identified in that study report vote on establishment of the district. And it would require that 2/3 of the property owners approve of the establishment of the district. So it wouldn't be something that was forced down the majority of the people's throats. We'd say that. So it would require buy-in, basically, from the beginning of the people who would be affected by this. It would also go to your local legislative body for a vote, and they could choose to either accept the study report, reject it, or return it with changes. Next slide. And some tips that Mary has to sort of get this process going is to speak to your prospective historic district property owners early in the process and keep in contact with them. So it's common to send a postcard or a letter to these folks, hold a neighborhood meeting or maybe a picnic, just sort of see where people stand on it and make sure that their concerns are addressed, make sure that education is available to them, and make sure that anything that comes up is sort of talked about before, people can get really upset about this and then talk to their neighbors, and then all of a sudden it doesn't happen, or it can go the other way too. So it's really important to have a lot of communication, be very open, and it's okay also to start small. And what Mary means by that is that you don't need, again, to include the entire National Registered District. You can start with a group, a smaller group, or maybe a smaller section that includes property owners that are really enthusiastic about this, and then you can expand on it always. So having that successful local historic district established is key. Next slide. So if all the voting goes through and everything gets approved, your commission would consist of 5 regular members, 3 alternates. One of those members would need to be a member from within the district, and then you'd have 1 or more expiring term per year, so you make sure there's some turnover, and you need to establish a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. Next slide. And again, the primary responsibilities of the commission members would be to establish rules of procedure. You would need to complete an annual report detailing the membership and your activities, and you'd provide that to Mary once a year. And then you would establish regulations. And your regulations, we have a bunch of examples that you could use, both Preservation Connecticut and the SHPO, but they're going to be to provide guidance to property owners and the goal is to get everyone to agree on prepping folks so that they know what to give to the commission in order to have a successful certificate of appropriateness in the end. Next slide. And what do you need a certificate of appropriateness for if you live within a historic district? Certainly you need one to erect a new building or to alter a building or structure in any way that is visible from a public right-of-way. So on the back of a building, for instance, if you can't see it from the streets surrounding it or the public ways surrounding it, you would need to get a certificate of appropriateness. But if you're going to be changing out the windows on the front of, the facade of a building lining Main Street, you would. So that's how that works. Some considerations is that you would need to really understand in that study report the historic and architectural significance and the materials that are being used commonly in the properties that are found in the district. And then you would sort of just evaluate each application that comes in based on your regulations that have been established, and hopefully we'll get to that in a little bit, but some design guidelines that also could be established to help both the commissioners and applicants. Next slide. So for new construction, again, it's really important to understand that new construction can and does happen in local historic districts all the time. It doesn't need to look like an old building, but it can. But generally, you want to match the general style. You don't want something that's completely out of sorts. And that's a very subjective determination, right? But you want the scale and the arrangement and the materials and the texture to sort of be in keeping, is the language that's used with the properties that are already there. You wouldn't want something to be completely dwarfing the surrounding structures and taking away from the district as a whole. And that's where you take into account the relationship to the architectural style and features of the existing buildings that are there. Next slide. So you do need a certificate of appropriateness when a property is being demolished. And that's something that we can get into a little bit more, but next slide. Oh, and for parking, sorry. She had that sort of scaffolded there. But you also, if parking areas are established, you'd also need to get a certificate of appropriateness for the establishment of parking areas. Now, something that is not reviewed is paint color. And there's another slide that she has further down, but paint is not a situation that you need to concern yourself with at all. Next slide. Other properties that are exempted and other actions that are exempted include anything that's owned by the state. So state properties are exempted from review. Ordinary exterior maintenance or repair. So say you had a windowsill that was rotted and you just wanted to repair that and paint it, you would not need a certificate of appropriateness. Say you wanted to, even in some municipalities, if you have an asphalt roof and you wanted to just replace that in kind, that would not require a certificate of appropriateness. It depends. Some municipalities have written into the regulations that it does, but many don't. Alterations to correct public safety issues, and that's something that's certified by the local building inspector. Those do not require certificates. Excuse me. Permits that are issued prior to the date of establishment of your local historic district do not need to be reviewed retroactively in any way. And any property owned by a nonprofit institute of higher education is also exempted. We call that the Yale exemption. Next slide. So establishing design review guidelines, we recommend that you do that. Not all municipalities do, but it really does make the process much easier, both for the applicant and for those reviewing these applications. And what we use as the basis for much of the projects that we review for grants or for local historic districts, what they use as a standard are the Secretary of the Interior standards. There are four levels of review standards. We would recommend that you use the rehabilitation standard, and that is one that is pretty flexible. It understands that properties change with different uses and also with time, and it allows for not necessarily the total replacement, but some replacement of materials as long as it's in kind. So, we understand things can't be completely replicated, but there's a little bit of flexibility in the rehab standards. The important thing is that character-defining features of a district are identified again. So when you're talking about Greek revival buildings, that that sort of what you think of as the Greek revival style would be maintained. And I think that knowing your district and knowing what's in the study report again is what's important moving forward, because that helps to guide. So having complete information at each step of the process really helps down the road. And also getting input from property owners to know what's important to them and knowing what they feel is reasonable to a certain extent within the parameters of the Secretary of the Interior's standards is important. And there is the opportunity to set up blanket approvals again for things like replacement in kind of roofs or even of, say you have a lot of shingled buildings in the district, you're going to maybe lose some shingles, making sure that doesn't need to be held up in any way, not held up, but it wouldn't require a certificate of appropriateness in any way. Next slide. So this is one of the benefits of establishing a local historic district, is that Granby can then become a certified local government. In order to become a certified local government, you do need to have at least one local historic district or property to be eligible. And what a CLG is a special partnership between the local municipality, the state historic preservation office, and the Park Service. And what it does is it really tries to work together with the state and local partners to have a grassroots preservation ethos in the town. And it really encourages participation of the local government. So for instance, I used to run the National Register program at the SHPO. And whenever we had a new National Register nomination in a certified local government, we would need to send it to the chief elected official. And we would need to get their sign off to make sure that they were in agreement with the establishment of these. You also would have access to 2 grant programs through the State Historic Preservation Office, the Historic Preservation Enhancement Grant and the Supplemental Certified Local Government Grant. So those are 2 that would be only available to certified local government communities. And in order to become a certified local government, you just need to follow that process with, again, Mary Dunn. It's a pretty straightforward process, and certification would happen at the request of the chief elected official. Next slide. And some concerns, you can go to the next slide. Again, the paint color. So people are always worried about this. There's actually in section 7-147D, subsection C, it prohibits commissions from ruling on paint color. So we have found that there are some that try to, but they can't. They actually can't. So that's just one somewhat minor concern that can be erased for people. Next slide. Commonly, we hear that the government will want access to your property or will control what you could do with your property. The historic designation has no bearing on how a property owner uses his or her property. So use is governed only by your local planning and zoning ordinance. The national, state, and local designation imposes no restrictions on any changes you want to make to your property. Oh, the national and state historic designation, local historic designation does. But all it requires is a review of exterior changes that are visible from the public right of way. So any interior changes are not subject to review. Again, anything on the rear of a property that wouldn't be visible is not subject to review. Next slide. There are what would maybe be considered non-historic buildings in local historic districts, but any property that is 50 years old or older can be considered for listing on the National Register. And there is no age limit, again, for listing on the state or for local historic district designation. And local historic districts need to be contiguous. We generally don't like to have any kind of like holes in the district, donut holes they call them. So it will often include buildings that maybe were built much later. Next slide. And also we hear from folks that they're worried that the local historic district commission will require them to return their house to its original appearance or to a period of time. And I chuckle, but it's a valid concern. So that no historic designation whatsoever, even the local, requires you to restore your property to a certain period or make any changes at all to your property. It just regulates according to your local regulations that are established, what you should do based on those parameters. Next slide. And that is the contact information for Mary Dunn and myself. That is actually my personal email, so I made a mistake there. But it's sbarrow@preservationct.org for me. And we have a local historic district website that we created at Preservation Connecticut, and I can put it in the chat if that's helpful. But it has a ton of information for people who are looking to establish a local historic district, people who are just asking questions about being in one, or for commissioners. And that's really it. Happy to answer any questions.
Let's just start around the table. Eric, do you have any questions? Abby? No, I'm good. Marty? Bill?
They do, on the website that you mentioned, they have a whole section about the benefits to the town and how it improves property values and things like that. So.
And
There are a lot of, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but there are a lot of studies that I can share with Bill too, that he can share with you, that have been done throughout the country on that economic benefit.
Yeah, I was trying to take notes on your correct email address when you were talking about the link to that. Were you going to provide that link in the chat? I didn't hear what you said.
I did just do that,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna give my email address as well. So those are both in the chat now.
Okay. We're recording the chat, right, at some point, so we'll have that information? Okay, thank you.
She's supposed to provide that orally. Yeah, if you want to come back here, you could read it off. Oh, okay.
Meg, did you have any questions?
No. But thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Bill, you're welcome to
Yeah.
say thank you. So,
Great.
yep,
Take care. If you have any questions, contact me. Thank you.
okay,
Thanks.
thank you. So I do encourage, first of all, everybody on the committee to play around with the website once we have the link to, look at some of those benefits and stuff. Bill, I'd also ask you to think about, because I know this is important to you, and you and a couple of your other neighbors and property owners to, Stacy made reference to the different standards that you might consider if you did an adopting
Yeah.
ordinance.
Yeah.
If you guys are willing to do it, I think it'd be valuable to us in this process if you looked at those standards and sort of picked out the ones that you think are most important. Because as we go through this process, I think we all agree that at some level, the preservation of our buildings in the town center, it has to be incorporated here.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that we can look at some of those standards so that they play some role, even if we don't jump right into adopting ordinance. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Anybody disagree with that? Everybody cool with that?
Yes.
All right. All right, so let's move on then to the next item on the agenda, which is just a reminder. I think last time we spent a fair amount of time talking about just our own individual views on why we're here. And I think our goal, correct me if I'm wrong, was to try to adopt a single statement or a couple of statements about why we are here. And the primary purpose of that statement would be to guide our public outreach, right? Isn't that what we talked about? Okay. And so we then asked Abby to take a few minutes, or I don't know, it could have taken a few hours. We asked Abby to take some time to try to synthesize what we said and what we talked about into some potential statements. I would love for us to plow through it tonight and adopt a statement so that we can begin to use it as we go into the next phase of public outreach. Everybody good with that goal? Marty, I'm going to pick on you because you took a bunch of notes on that. So where
I did?
on your sheet there?
Oh.
Yeah. What do you think?
I like, Abby, this is very good, the way you put this together, and my notes that Mark is referencing, it has some strong action words to providing a framework to build, to build upon, we're building upon something that we have, which is, the infrastructure, or let's just say improvements that are already in place in the center. And then to create a plan, master plan, a document that we have to work with and to build upon the, more improvements for the center of town, so.
So are you advocating we combine all three and make that our statement?
It's going to be hard not to have all three of these elements in the statement.
Okay.
So I'm advocating for type of a combination of combining all this somehow.
Okay, would you be happy if we just adopted all three without necessarily combining them? Are you happy with the words in them?
Yes, I had the thought on the last one would be to strengthen Granby community and, hold on, let me see. It contributes to a strengthened Granby community and our regional destination or regional destination. Some use of the word regional as it's kind of a hub. It draws us back to the first statement where it talks about visitors. So it's not just for our own community, but also for making it as a part of the region. Or something like that. We'll kind of play with that a little bit.
All right, before we play, Meg, what do you think?
Yeah, thanks for your work on this. I think it's very thoughtful, and I agree. All three sort of capture something. If I had to pick one, which we may not have to, I am drawn to the first one. I like that it talks about a framework because that's what we're doing. We're creating a structure in which to move forward with the doing. And I like the inviting, connected, healthy, vibrant, resilient. And I like that it points back to the 2016 plan of conservation and development. And I know that that's going to be updated, so that leaves a little wiggle room to continue the process work and updating to make it apply to the future. So yeah, if we had to vote, my vote would be 1.
Do you have any objection to including all 3?
No, because I agree that they are different, and in some ways the other 2 are more specific and they're kind of pointing back to number 1, so I think the specificity is nice. So no, I don't.
Okay.
Unless we wanted it to be more concise for like a user-friendly, we may, in addition, want a more concise one. It's funny that I say concise, because if we look at my literature.
All right, John, what are your thoughts?
So I can make an argument that 2 and 3 are contemplated in number 1. So I'm not sure really whether 2 and 3 are absolutely vital. I think 1 is fine. I like the linkage to the 2016 POCD, but it also feels like it's limited. So I'm not sure that necessarily has to be there. But I do like everything up to 2016. I think is everything up to visitors. I think is absolutely spot on and really talks about if you want a vision document for the work, a vision statement for the work. I think it's pretty good.
Okay. I don't have any objection to starting with all 3 and paring it down if that's what we need to do. I do kind of agree with John that number 1 incorporates all 3 at some level. Disagree with John a little bit. I do think it has to have a specific reference to the plan of conservation. That's a couple reasons. That was part of our specific scope, was to make sure that we were continuing to be consistent with it. And that document is the senior most document that's supposed to be guiding our work. So I do think we have to refer back to it. Not just as it relates to town center. That plan articulates lots of other goals and strategies for the community. So to me, it's important to keep a reference to the plan in the wiring here. I would be fine either way if we just started with number 1 and kept 2 and 3 in our back pocket as we are describing the process to people. Also okay with using all 3. Mr. Myers.
So I'll agree with you that the reason why we're sitting here tonight is because of the POCD. It was a charge in the POCD to study the center, so tying back to the POCD I think is important, and I'm fine with leaving all 3. We can shake out redundancy in future discussions.
All right. John, how strongly do you feel about eliminating 2 and 3?
If they, I don't know, I think they are relatively redundant. I would also offer that if we're going to leave 3 in, the word plan needs to change, because we talk about a framework on the front end and then we throw in plan in this. And if we're going to grab all 3 of them, they need to be more artfully synthesized than 3 separate statements. I guess that's where I'm at. How's that?
To add on to that thought, John, it probably, not that we are committed to the design thinking framework or locked into it, but if we did have 1, it would be easier to get public input and anchor back to it.
I'm gonna agree with that. I think if our goal was to just provide a single statement, I think you were the one, Marty, who said we got to have something that tells people why they should come and participate. Right. To me, the first one captures everything we need, and it's simple enough that people can do that. So
we can put it up, we can
yeah.
It's, yeah,
Somebody
a
want to
little
make
more
a motion?
tangible.
Go ahead, Jim.
It's also easily digestible too.
Yeah. Somebody want to make a motion to adopt number one as the why are we here statement? Let's just, go ahead.
I'll adopt one as our
That's your motion?
main statement.
All right,
I second that.
all right. Do we need to discuss it any further? Is everybody comfortable with that motion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Bye.
Did you guys
I
vote?
like to say,
Like, yeah,
All right, any nays? All right, that's good work. Thank you, Abby. I know you probably put a lot of effort into getting us that far. So I appreciate it.
that's a lot of material to pull together, just on one spot.
So the next item on the agenda is to discuss draft action steps and timeline. Abby passed out tonight, which we can make available to the public as we go forward. This came from, you might remember, I think in one of our first couple of meetings, at least one, and maybe a couple of citizens said, start to put some ideas around a timeline of how do we get from where we are to where we want to be. And so Meg and I worked on that for your consideration.
This one's gonna be easier to look at. The other is a little more process work to make sure that it was
For the second page.
what we were kind of following. Yeah, I think it's gonna be easier to look at visually, less busy.
So let me take a second and summarize it. Besides, I think it helps us to have some general timelines in mind. I do also think it's important for us to get to a point where if we are looking to hire a consultant to do this plan, that we've identified a time frame to do that, because there is currently no funding source for that. And so putting it in a time frame that leads us to where we want to be will enhance our ability to find a funding source. So very quickly, we just did number one. Number two was to start to gather citizen input on a vision that's guided by what we just adopted. And there's some subcomponents of that, which is to identify the process stakeholders. You'll see that all there. Once we get that input, step three would be to develop the components of a master plan that implement that vision. We talked about that last time, that would be the next physical document we would produce, is what do we want our master plan to include, like standards related to historic preservation, for example. And step four would be to actually engage a consultant to develop the master plan. Stage five is to then go back out, once that's been drafted, and to take citizen input on the master plan to confirm that we achieved the vision, and then to adopt a master plan. So we don't have to take action on this tonight. We can, if you guys are comfortable. It's certainly, there are moving parts. Obviously, this isn't written in stone, but it kind of gives us some timeframes to kind of start to keep our feet to the fire and move. So the next step, if we adopted this, would be to focus our next meeting on step two, which is we agree on a process and a list of stakeholders and a general schedule for getting input.
And I just want to add to that real quick that I did end up putting the graphics next to it, just so we could, if we wanted to do the design thinking, it would be, the first one's kind of the why are we here, the problem statement. The next icon, and this might help the public follow it better too, just to have these quick visuals. This is gathering evidence. 3 falls under the category of ideation. 4, engaging a consultant, that's prototyping, in this case, maybe rendering from an architect. And then testing is the last one.
So John, we can start with you. What do you think generally of the concept?
I think it's absolutely fine. It's nice to have it laid out in a thoughtful manner that gives us some benchmarks to follow, and I'm all for it. So I think the sooner that we can get into the difficult work of stakeholder, not even difficult, but the time-consuming work of stakeholder engagement to make sure that we don't leave any stones unturned, I think would be important. So I think it's ready to go.
Meg?
Yeah, I think it's great. I think number 2 is probably the most important one, in terms of really being thorough. That could be its own category, but again, we're trying to be concise and streamline a little.
I helped write it, so I think it's brilliant. The only other thing I would point out is that the step 2 is aggressive, but I think it's necessarily aggressive. So we give ourselves 1 month between now and February and decide in February the components of the process. And then in March and April, we're implementing the process. But I think it's a good start for us. So, Eric?
It's workable. No issue.
Okay, Marty?
Yeah, I think this is a step in the right direction to put together action steps and a timeline. I think what's also going to be important early on is that we define consultant.
Yeah.
Because I am wondering, or is a consultant going to be able to help us with a vision and what the components of a master plan are going to be?
Again, that's something that you and I think, have a slightly different thinking on, but I agree with your point that we have to work on that as we move along. I think the way this is generally set out is designed for us to do the original outreach, to develop a vision, and us to limit the components of the master plan in terms of very, very specific things, like a scope of work almost. This is what we want the consultant to do. I'm making it up. Architectural standards, pedestrian plans, those kind of things. But we don't have to make that decision. No, I'm going to let you talk. So, and then we hire a true consultant, a firm that can bring all of those components together, with the end result being a document or a set of documents that the town can use to work going forward. The planning commission uses it to judge decision making, that kind of stuff. So that's what this entails. But I hear your thought that we might engage a consultant a little sooner to help us with some of this.
Yes, I think someone from the outside might be very valuable when it comes to the vision process. Because we have someone kind of from the outside looking in, helping to draw information, not only from citizens, but from this group, from staff, from the board or commission. It could be, the vision part of it could be a little bit wider than just the public. Well, I guess you have stakeholders, so that's kind of a broad term. And then also, the components of the master plan, what we're going to be doing with the master plan in the future.
All right.
That's that we have to grapple with a little bit, so we know what we know what the needed components have to be.
That's fair.
But overall, this is a good beginning to a good thought process here.
So are you comfortable with the notion that if we get through steps 1 and 2, what the hopeful intended output is a vision statement that we created sort of on our own, and then we can make the decision? Are we happy with that, or do we need to bring the consultant in to help us massage the vision?
Well, the slight concern would be a consultant coming on later and saying or asking, did you talk to stakeholders or whatever about this or about that? And we're going to either answer that yes or no, or we thought so. So, maybe it's the type of thing we try to look at in tandem, where we're reaching out, but also getting some guidance from consultant.
Our paid consultant, you mean? So what if we did this? So because this actually has us, I think, having this exact conversation in February. That's what the schedule says. Our goal is at our next meeting, we are going to try to identify the process of the stakeholders and stuff. So we can kind of see there where we're at and then make that another decision point. You comfortable?
Mhm.
You comfortable?
Mhm.
You comfortable with that, John?
Yes, sir.
So, do we want to adopt this tonight as our preliminary schedule?
Sure.
I will accept a motion to that effect.
So moved.
I will need a second.
Oh, second.
All right. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, next item on the agenda is action items for our next meeting. So it seems to me if we could set like some sort of interim deadline, if you will, for us to get, if you're willing to do it, Abby, our thoughts to you on those things that we just listed in number 2. What do we think the process will be? Who do we think the stakeholders should be? And is everybody willing to spend some time on that in the next couple of weeks so we get it to Abby in time to synthesize it?
Schedule permitting.
No one's schedule permits. So what if I'm just opening my calendar here, so what if we set, we don't meet until the 28th, so what if we set February 16th as a deadline to get stuff to you?
That's fine. You guys are going to do the work though. In a few meetings back, I presented.
Hang on just a second.
Okay.
Go ahead. If you don't, that doesn't work, then
It does, but
Process stakeholders.
Friday the 16th. Busy week.
no, understood. That, of course, that actually is a very good.
I'm going to just be direct. I'm unclear as what we have to give to who on the 16th.
So if you go to this thing here.
Yeah, I
Right,
get
so
that.
any ideas on stakeholders you think we need to be reaching? If we're gonna do our own public outreach currently under this system, who should we invite? Do you have any ideas on what the process should be? Should it be one big meeting? Should it be a series of separate meetings? Those are the kind of things.
Post this meeting, will you memorialize those
Yes.
action items?
Yep.
In an email to?
Yeah, I'll get that out to everyone.
Perfect.
Good idea.
So we're consistent.
Okay. So where were we? So, any objection to setting the tentative deadline to getting any of your thoughts to Abby on the 16th? The more we get to Abby ahead of time, the easier it'll be for these meetings. That's, all right. You okay, Meg?
Yeah, no, I was
cut you
just
off.
gonna say, no, it's fine that, a couple meetings back, I started a list of stakeholders.
Yeah.
So that might be, I can resend it and some of those things, if it's helpful to have a document to add on to or to cross out.
No,
Hopefully not that, but
No, it absolutely would be.
I could even put it in, I'll send it.
Okay.
Yeah, right now it's in like a presentation, which isn't really friendly for people to scratch out, so I'll put it in a Word document or something.
Would you do that and send it to Abby? And
Yep.
she'll be the circulator? Okay. Any other action items for the next meeting? Our next meeting will be the 28th, is that right? Of February? Okay. So now it's the time for public session. Maggie, you want anything? You're good? Are you sure?
I feel like I'm supposed to say something.
All right, thank you. All right, on Zoom? Anybody on Zoom want to address us in the public session? Going once? Twice? Okay, we'll close the public session. I think that means we are ready to adjourn then. Anything else before we adjourn? Bill, thanks again.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Get better, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much, folks. I appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.